What makes a bug a bug?
Is there a cat in Caterpillar?
And what kind of creepy crawly is a Meggy Licky Spinny?
We'll inspect some insects, spy on some spiders, and look at the lowdown on locusts on this etymological episode of Words Unravelled.
Welcome to another Words Unravelled. I'm Rob Watts from the YouTube channel Rob Words.
And I'm Jess, author of the etymology books Once Upon a Word and Words from Hell. And today we are talking about insects, and there is a particular reason. Well, okay, A, I like bugs, but B, we're talking about insects because the joke that I am told, more than any other joke, at least on a weekly basis via DMs, emails, texts, family members, friends, strangers, is this. People who don't know the difference between etymology and entomology bug me in ways I can't put into words. So
You seriously get that on a weekly basis?
Absolutely. More than once a week sometimes. Never heard that one before. I mean, to be fair, it's a good joke. If I'm going to be told one joke all the time, that's better than most.
You know, I actually met up with a friend earlier who is not paying enough attention to what I do for a living, and I found myself having to, because you asked what I was doing later. So I'm doing a podcast about entomology, and then I found myself having to explain entomology and etymology, and it got incredibly confusing. Actually,
Yep.
Yeah. What does entomology literally mean?
It means the same thing as insect, which we'll also get into, but it means things that are segmented or cut up, basically. One of them just happens to be Greek and one is Latin.
Yeah, the entomo bit. So it's the study of cut up things.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the Greek. And insect means cut up thing, basically, because insects are made up of these three pieces. That's part of, well, actually, there is a very specific description of what an insect is and what separates it from other things like arachnids and such, and we will get into that.
Entomology used to encompass basically everything that looked like a bug, so it also included arthropods like arachnids and myriapods, which is millipedes and centipedes, literally countless feet.
Insects are arthropods. So arthropod is like that is the term for creepy crawly, what we might call it, creepy crawly, all the little tiny things that scuttle and fly and wriggle.
And arthropod means segmented foot.
Ah, okay, right. Because they do. Their legs are jointed. That's one thing that they've all got in common, is that if they've got legs. Okay, so what is an insect?
A little sliced thing.
Yeah, it is. So it's made up, and it does have to be made up of three parts to be an insect. The head, which has got either a retractable proboscis, or mouth parts, antennae and compound eyes. That's part number one. Part number two is the thorax, which has to bear three pairs of legs, right? So it can only have 6 legs, an insect, and that is defining of an insect, and 1 or 2 pairs of wings, and then an abdomen that's got all of its like poopy bits and stuff as well, which is the big bit at the back. I like the best example to think of is the ant, because the ant is the most segmented, and probably the word ant goes back to an ancient word meaning exactly the same as insect and the start of entomology. It probably just means in pieces or cut up.
Though there are two schools of thought here. It could be because of the shape of its body, or it could be because they often are like leafcutter ants, can bite things off with their mandibles. But either way, it is cutting off. Like that is what ant means.
And there's an old word for it. So in Old English, it was like one of the words for it was an empt, which is interesting because there's still a dialect word that you'll hear, particularly in, I think, the southwest of England, emmet, which means
and that's exactly how the Old English word is spelled, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that stays around. Yeah, ant.
I love ants. Actually, now to be perfectly clear, my spouse loves ants. But he got into
you are
ants.
one and the same, of course.
And he started collecting queens, but his vision is not as good as mine. He wears rather thick glasses. It's easier for me to spot things, and I also go on like trail adventures a little more frequently. So I became the one to catch the queens for a while. So I was identifying them and then scooping them up and bringing them back for him to like form into a colony. We don't have any right now, but we've had some for a while, and we always give them queenly names. I do have a small misadventure here. Do you know what a velvet ant is?
I don't.
It's not an ant, but it looks like one. It is whoever knows about entomology here is going to know exactly what I'm about to say. But they are these fuzzy, bright red ant-looking things, insects, but they are actually wingless wasps. Females pack one of the most powerful stings in the insect kingdom, which has earned them the nickname cow killer. I handled one. I found one, thinking it was an ant queen, and let it climb all over my arms. Fortunately, it did not sting me. But when I got it into a tube and I brought it back, and he was like, "I don't think this is an ant." And it wasn't.
A wingless wasp.
Yeah. And they can sting you really hard. I'm really happy that one didn't.
So wait, because sometimes they talk about insects having really powerful venom or whatever, but actually, yeah, it's powerful, but because they're so tiny, if they were to inflict it upon a human, it wouldn't really matter, because
right, it kind of
a
depends
drop in
on
the
the
ocean.
insect. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's and you talk about like animals that live, or particularly insects and the like that live in colonies. There's a name for those. They're Hymenoptera.
Ooh,
Yeah,
love that.
which means actually membrane wing. So
yeah, I was going to say hymen, right?
hymen is the same hymen as the hymen we know and love. I wish I hadn't phrased it like that, but yeah, it is that same hymen, meaning membrane. It's because their wings, they generally have wings that are quite sort of membranous. You don't think of ants as having wings, but, of course they do. You see them all taken off, one day of the year. And do you have the Flying Ants Day? Flying Ants Day.
I mean, we observe nuptial flights when male ants and queens go and fly and try new. It's not like one day of the year, but you can like right now there are some outside on my patio that I saw just now.
I see. I distinctly, well, I mean, it's definitely a thing that I remember in Britain is there would just be a day where it'd be like Flying Ant Day, and all of a sudden you just see them all climbing to the end, the tip of the blades of grass, and they all take off on the same day. It's kind of
that's
incredible.
lovely.
Yeah,
little segmented angels.
Yes. Truly gorgeous. So yeah, we'll get into more specific types of insect as well, but let's just nail down, because one of my big bugbears is the difference between knowing the difference between insects, bugs, beetles, etc.
Right, because bugs, to officially call something a bug, which does have a scientific definition, it must belong to Hymenoptera. Is that right?
That is right. Yeah. So that is but the word bug was way more vague than that scientific term suggests. That's a term that's come up with in the 18th century, so relatively recent, when they decide bug, we need to have a definition for a bug. And yeah, they decide that it is the Hymenoptera, and it has to have mouth parts adapted for piercing and sucking plant and animal juices, it has to have forewings that are thickened at the base, and they have to undergo incomplete metamorphosis. Now this is important because this is what makes bugs distinct from beetles, right? So beetles have 4 stages of life. They are born in an egg, right? Then they hatch into a larva. Then they have their pupal phase. No, they pupate, whatever. And then they are the adult. Whereas a bug, by this definition, I stress, does not do that. The bug is born as a junior version of itself, right? And then it grows up into a big one.
So a ladybug is not a bug.
No, a ladybug is a beetle. Let's talk about ladybugs. Can we talk about ladybugs, because it's such a good one? Because I don't call it a ladybug, do I? I call it a ladybird.
Ah, that's right. Which is the name of my dog, as a matter of fact.
Oh, that's so sweet, ladybird. Was your dog given that name with a mind to the insect?
No, so she was named after King of the Hill, the cartoon series, in which Hank Hill has a dog named Ladybird, who is named after Ladybird Johnson.
Okay, I get it. Well, so this is one of those UK-America differences where actually, for once, the British term is the older. We have been calling them ladybirds for longer than we've been calling them ladybugs. They are not bugs. as we
Nor
discussed, they're
birds.
beetles, and they're certainly not birds. Yeah, they're of the order, no, the genus, I say, Coccinella, and actually in French they're called coccinelle, which is where we get the word cochineal. It's not actually from ladybirds that we get that red dye. It's a different red bug, but it's where cochineal is. But there's an older word that was being used even before ladybirds, and that was lady cows, which is absolutely mad. And I could find no explanation of why they were called lady cows. It might be because of the spots, which are kind of reminiscent of Frisian cows,
Yeah, I was
blobs
thinking
on the
like
back.
the way they move too. They herd and they like, I don't know. If you zoomed out on a herd of cattle, you might find a resemblance in the way that they move across a field.
It's not the obvious comparison, though, is it? But it's not only in English that this exists. There is a dialect term in German that is Frauenkühlein, which means little cow lady.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, so you could call them lady cows, you could call them cow ladies. There have been other names for them as well. German has this name, Marienkäfer, which means Mary's beetle, which is a bit more like ladybug, right? So ladybug does come along later than ladybird. It might just be making sense of bird because it doesn't make any sense to call it a bird. So ladybug is, there are direct translations of that in other languages. So it's not completely stupid.
It's funny to have bug on there too, though, because like the literal meaning of bug is something that's scary, right? Which is why it's in words like bugbear and bugaboo and things like that. Is it's a scary thing, so it's a little scary lady when you call it a ladybird.
And I should say, actually, more precisely, that Marienkäfer, that I said the German one, that actually means Mary's beetle rather than just Mary's bug, I should say. Huh. But we are talking about the fact that a bug, for a very long time before they decided to make a scientific description of it, was just something scary, like a bogeyman or something like that, an evil spirit or something like that would steal children away if they were naughty. It's a sort of bogeyman thing was a bug. It's spelled Bugge in Middle English. And a bugbear is a direct reference to that. So originally your bugbear was not something that just kind of annoys you a bit. It's a permanent imaginary terror that you have, something that you fear all of the time. But we've sort of softened it to it being like a pet peeve or something like that.
We've discussed before that bear is named for being like a scary thing we don't talk about.
yeah. The word, it kind of just,
scary brown thing.
Brown thing, yeah, scary brown thing. Well, yeah, it could just be anything that was just a bit sort of annoying and little.
So we've learned that we have regular bugs. Well, we have bugs in general, and then we have true bugs, which is, if a bug isn't from the Hymenoptera region of France, it's just a sparkling skittermajig.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, but when we talk about like a bug in the system or something like that,
right,
we're calling upon this much older use of the word bug and not the scientific one.
Excellent.
Oh, something we do have to point out, arachnids are not insects.
Right.
So spiders, not insects. Scorpions, not insects. Mites, not insects. Arachnids have got 8 legs and 2 segments to themselves.
One thing that I think I knew, but I hadn't, thought through the distinction. Arachnology is the study of like all arachnids, not specifically spiders, and the study of spiders specifically is arachnology, which is also related to an early word for spider that English has, which is arraign.
Yeah, I've got a lovely list of spidery words from centuries past. Yeah,
they're good ones.
Arraign is good, which is, like you say, it's just a sort of anglicization of the Latin word for a spider. But they've been called lobs, they've been called cops, they've been called spinners, they've been called spinsters, they've been called atacops, etacops, spin cops, and here's a good one for you, Meggy Licky Spinny.
What?
Meggy Licky Spinny. Yeah.
Meggy Licky Spinny.
Yeah, it's hyphenated Meggy Licky Spinny, Scottish dialect for a spider. You could also have a Meggy Many Feet, which is a centipede.
Yeah, so I was looking this up in relation to the word magpie, because the mag in magpie is also a shortening of Margaret. When you would shorten Meg or mag in a word, it usually meant like a lady thing you didn't like very much, or it was too much or too loud or too busy, whatever else.
Oh, I see. So I was wondering why they'd chosen of all the names a derivative of Margaret, as Meggy is.
There are a number of other ones, like also like artillery tends to be named like Big Meg and things like that.
Oh, poor Meg.
Right. You mentioned Attercop, and one of my favorite references to that is in The Hobbit when Bilbo is trying to distract the spiders, and he sings like a mean little song about them and calls them Attercops.
Yeah, and is the atter, is that poison or something like that?
Poison or venom head, yeah. And then the cop part is the same element we see in cobweb.
Yeah, so if you're wondering what cobweb actually means, it does just mean spider web. Oh, scorpion, by the way, really, really boring. I looked that one up. It's basically been called scorpion since Greek, and we don't know what it was called before that. So that word, so scorpios in Greek means the thing that a scorpion is. And we don't know what literally that could possibly have meant. It's a very boring one, but I thought I'd give it a mention.
You would have to guess based on the sound that it has something to do with their like skittery, scrapey, clicky, clacky, stingy,
Scorpions.
crunchy. I don't know.
Good little fact about a scorpion that someone once told me. I say a fact, a thing that someone once told me. I think it's true. Right, so the bigger the claws, right, likely the less dangerous the venom.
Are the ones with the big claws, I would assume maybe they're like males showing off, because like sometimes crustaceans that coordinates with, I don't know.
I just think if you've got one, you don't necessarily need the other. So they're not having to make up for anything.
Coleopterology is the study of beetles. Dipterology is the study of flies, mosquitoes, and midges. Myrmecology is the study of ants. And I like this one. Apiology is typically the one you see more these days, but melitology is the study of bees. And as we know...
Oh, okay. Is that because it's a honey reference?
Exactly. A lot of words that are related to bees and their scientific names, and even the name Melissa, which means honeybee, is all from the word for honey, the Greek word for honey.
Beautiful. Apiary, that comes from Latin apis, right? Which means
for bee.
A bee. And actually is related to the word bee, right? So you go back far enough to an ancient root, and it's one of these things when you know if you follow the Germanic route, you maybe have a word with a B, but if you follow it through the Romance route, you end up with a word with a P. But these two roots combine in the French word for a bee, which is an abeille. So it starts with that a from the Latin, but has the B from the Germanic, because the French have had plenty of Germans in their midst and at their borders. I don't mean literally Germans, I mean Germanic groups. Yeah, but it's a really ancient word for a bee. It's kind of what it's meant. Abiology. Yeah, I think they think that bee comes from like an ancient root word that means something like quivering or buzzing, which would make a lot of sense, doesn't it, from the sounds that they make.
Absolutely.
Adorable. Much better than wasps. Bloody hate wasps.
Oh, yeah.
But they do have one of my favorite etymologies because there's a great story about it. Well, so it's not that there's an interesting meaning to the word wasp. It means wasp, right? As far back as you can go, it goes a long way back. You've got Latin vesper, and it's very around the Western European languages. I'm not very good on the Eastern European languages. People will probably have noticed, but it's got a similar name everywhere. But what I like about the word wasp, well, one, it's that for a long time it was waps, and a lot of the early versions swapped the P and the S around, which is
that's right,
which is gorgeous, wappies and stuff like that in Middle English. But also, it's just I've often gone on about how we have, for example, these doublets in English of guardian and warden, and guarantee and warranty, these two versions of words that have come from French, but two different types of French, one with a g sound and one with a w sound. And that plays out in the fact that the French word for a wasp is a guêpe, right?
Ah!
Yes. And you think, well, where's the S in there? But guêpe has a little accent on top. It's got a little hat, right? Which tells you that at one point there was an S in there. And so at one point it would have been gesper, which is just a dialect version of wesper, from which we get wasp.
That is much cooler than that bug deserves.
Yeah, I really do hate wasps. I was actually ranting about wasps the other day. We were walking to the football match here in Germany, and we got some brunch. Not the most sort of laddish behavior, having our mimosa, but we got suddenly swarmed by wasps and had to go inside. It was horrible. So after we'd finished and we went to the football stadium, we just grabbed a couple of beers and walked with them. It's a great thing in Germany. You had this vague beer where you're allowed to just walk in the street with a beer. It's fantastic. Did that, and all the way I was ranting about how much I hated wasps, and actually I would make them illegal. I know it could have no real effect, me making them illegal, but I think I could at least discourage people from cultivating them in any sort of way, and discourage wasps. Anyway, they must have heard me, because I then took a swig of my beer and
oh no,
wasp in my beer, sting on the face, big fat lip all the way through the football match. Olé, 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 olé. Yeah.
You summoned the wasp.
I did. I deserved it. I was talking utter wasp trash, and total Vesper trash. They got me. And things like hornets, by the way. So wasp is actually a big overarching term. I mean, we use it quite specifically for the yellow jacket over here, but hornets are wasps, for example. Your little wingless fella.
And that means like a little thorny.
I'm saying I think we have to beep that one. I think that's one of the words we have to beep. Yes. Well, perhaps. So this is an interesting one. Is a hornet horny in some way? So there is one school of thought that, yes, it goes back to some term meaning a horn blower or something like that, or the fact that it's got a
they also kind of
thing.
look like a little tube. I don't know.
Yeah, but there's another school of thought, and actually the one that I think etymologists favor these days, and that is that hornet, the earliest versions of the word, are a coining in themselves for just this animal. And
Scorpion.
That later association with the idea of a horn has meant the start of that word has become horn. So it's a folk etymology.
Interesting.
It is interesting, isn't it? It's the sort of thing we find interesting. I don't know if it's interesting to everyone else. So hornets may or may not be horny. We don't know.
Dragonflies have been the victim of much talking throughout history. Dragonfly is about the coolest name they've ever had. They've had equally cool names, but always more insulting than that. They can bite, but they don't go out of their way to bite people because they don't drink blood or anything, and they don't sting. You'd have to like catch one and hold it in your hands, and even then its mandibles aren't designed for biting skin, so it probably can't really hurt you that much, but they look like they could. They're pointy, and so they've had names like throughout history, like Adderbolt, like it's shaped like a tiny like snake bolt, and then a devil's darning needle, and an eye snatcher, and an ear cutter.
My experience of them has been nothing but benign or even benevolent. I love these guys.
I love. Yeah, they're some of my favorites.
Yeah.
They're pretty. They're cool to watch. They eat things that I don't like.
They don't cause any problems, do they?
Yeah. No,
Poor
justice
things.
for dragonflies.
Yeah.
They have a cool name now, so I feel like they've received their justice. Even in Welsh, their name literally meant adder's servant. Apparently, their affiliation with snakes has to do with the fact that they look like kind of teeny tiny flying snakes.
Butterflies we've talked about before, because we talked about butterflies.
We should talk about them again. I mean,
we talked about them in our episode about myths in etymology and things that people believe that aren't true.
Because people will frequently say that butterfly is a reversal of the term flutterby, which it simply isn't.
A spoonerism. No, it isn't. No, the reason there's a butter there, well, we don't know for certain, but there's a few theories. One of them is that it's, so in Europe, the most common butterflies are kind of butter colored. Their wings, they just sort of are.
Mm-hmm.
Their effluence looks a bit buttery. And also they were seen to hang around milk churns. There's a sort of myth that they steal butter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is all real.
Or that witches
will
turn themselves into butterflies in order to steal butter.
Right. So they've been called butter witches in the past. They've been called butter shits in the past as well. But they've never been called flutterbys, as satisfying spoonerism as that is.
I mean, they have been, but only in the past couple of centuries, whereas the word butterfly and butter shit and butter witch and milk thief and things like this date back centuries and centuries and have cognates in many languages. So we have lots of evidence that flutterby was not the inspiration for the term.
Yeah, in Old English it is butterfly. It is there.
Could we talk about caterpillars, and could I go get a visual aid?
Yes.
Give me a moment.
Come back soon. What's going to be interesting to find out is whether there is a cat at the start of caterpillar. Oh, it's a cat. Yes. Maybe we can do some sort of cat comparison. Hold on. Puss.
Excellent.
Hey, it's Cats Unravelled.
It is.
Hold on. I know why I brought my cat over, because I'll take any excuse to. Why did you bring your cat over?
Because the literal meaning of the word caterpillar is this. It is a shaggy cat. I have a big fluffy cat here who's very shaggy.
It is important. Mine is not a caterpillar. It is not shaggy enough. Are you, Vasilisa? No.
Also a shoulder cat, so that's going to be a thing for a second.
She's annoyed that I've taken her off the balcony. Thank you for taking part in this edition of Words Unravelled.
Wait, what is your cat's name?
Vasilisa. She has a Ukrainian name. She's a Ukrainian refugee cat.
This is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. We call him Wolf. And I'm going to put him down.
Mozart. Beautiful stuff. So there is indeed a cat in caterpillar.
A shaggy cat, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
It's from the two elements that it is made of are cata, meaning cat, and pilosus, meaning hairy or shaggy or covered with hair. Now, this wasn't what they were called in Old English, right?
It isn't. What were they called?
Cowl worms or coal worms. So, and we know that one from our food episode, a cabbage worm, literally.
Oh, right. Okay. Makes more sense, doesn't it? Incidentally, the ending of our modern way of spelling caterpillar, which is quite a big distortion of the caterpillars from the French. It ends with AR. That's like Samuel Johnson's fault. It was for a long time spelled with ER, but he opted for the AR ending.
So it's an agent now ending that it happens to share with Bursar for some reason.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if he was thinking that hard about it. I think they've just got two spellings that were doing the rounds, and he plumped for one, and we're stuck with that. And actually, I find caterpillar really hard to spell.
I feel like as a childhood student of Eric Carle and the Hungry Caterpillar, I did not struggle with that one in particular, but there are plenty more that I do.
That's a good point. I read that as well as a child. It's one of the earliest words I'd have read, but no.
Other languages have other animals that inspired the names for caterpillars. Like in the modern French word for caterpillar, chenille means little dog. In some Italian dialects, they're called gattola or little cat, which I guess same animal. And then in Portuguese, lagata comes from the Latin lacertus, meaning lizard. We've discussed that mussel literally means like mousy, but you could describe someone also as lacertus, meaning lizardy, and that means the same thing. It means like muscular.
I remember that was way back, that episode. I remember you telling me
that was a good one.
Yeah. So it's not only butterflies that have caterpillars, they are caterpillars of moths as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And moth is fun. And I love the spelling of moth in Old English.
What is it? Is it spelled with that fun letter?
It's got two N's.
Oh, perfect.
It's right in a row.
Beautiful. Gotta love it. That actually does refer to the caterpillar of the animal, not the flappy version of the moth. It's related to words like midge, which is one of the words for a little fly that bites you, that hangs around the water. Not quite a mosquito, although that is related to other Germanic words for the mosquito, like the mugga in Swedish and the mücke in German, which mean mosquito. Here's an interesting thing. The French word for mosquito is moustique, which is just a buggering up of mosquito.
Oh, is it? It's like
a
metathesis of its various components.
Yeah, that's right. They didn't quite manage all the way over in Spain, like, a meter away. They somehow managed to lose in translation the word mosquito,
which means literally little fly, right? Which so I feel like that needs. I mean, if I have an enemy insect, it is the mosquito.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, it's obviously the worst. We can get rid of them and the wasps. It's fine, but it's like one's a big problem there, and the other is an irritation here. And if we can eradicate both of those things, that's fine by me.
I have a couple of species of pretty spiders in my backyard that eat mosquitoes, and I'm okay with them helping me out with that. I also have like frogs in my pond, and they eat the mosquitoes. So I have warriors on my behalf.
One of the big things about moving to continental Europe, where the summers are much warmer, was being faced with mosquito. I maintain that I've never come across a mosquito in Britain. I have friends who claim they have, but I think they're just dramatic and they've just been dealing with midges. But maybe someone can confirm or deny whether mosquitoes are really a thing in Britain. They're certainly not in the north, where I'm from. I don't think we've got midges. Was it you that was telling me about the praying mantis before?
Which part? Because there are multiple parts.
Multiple segments of the praying mantis.
Yes, exactly. I love these guys. They're probably my favorite kind of insect, and there are so many different kinds of mantises, like the orchid mantis and stuff. Looks like a little dancing orchid. They are called praying mantises, as in saying your prayers at church, not praying mantises, as in preying on things, preying on other animals, even though they also do a lot of that.
Yeah, but I mean, you only have to look at the spelling to get that right, but I understand why a lot of people do think of them as
I mean,
praying.
Both are true.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But the mantis bit itself means divine. It's kind of a religious thing anyway, which is kind of cool.
It's from the same root as words for like thinking and seeing and divining, which is very cool.
Oh, like mentis,
like mental. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Excellent. Yes, the idea of a sort of a prophet. Do you think it's widely known what a locust actually is?
A lobster.
That it's a lobster?
Yeah, it originally meant lobster and locusts.
Originally meant that, yes. So it's related to it. Yes, it is also related to the French langouste and langoustine, which people will have perhaps eaten as well. But no, what I mean is, do people know the difference between a locust and a grasshopper or a cricket or something like that?
I had trouble when I was younger distinguishing between locusts and cicadas, which are different things. Because, you know, in the Bible, you have the swarm of locusts, and the thing that swarmed when I was a kid was the cicadas.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So actually, the translation in the Bible, that like the word locust is used in a lot of circumstances where different words are used in other translations of the Bible. So sometimes when the Bible refers to a locust, it's not referring to a locust at all. Sometimes it is, like the plague of locusts probably was locust. But what I was trying to get at is, because I think I was quite old, as in it was quite recent that I sort of realized this whole thing about a locust not being its own species. It absolutely isn't a species of anything. A locust is a grasshopper that has changed its behavior a bit and joined a swarm, which I thought was interesting. So I thought you had locusts and you had grasshoppers, but no, locusts are grasshoppers.
Interesting.
Yes, cicada. That's an interesting one. So it's related to the word cricket, actually, and you can kind of see you've got the k-k-d thing going on there. The French word criquet was also used for a cicada. Now they call them cigales, which is a nice Provençal word from the south of France, which is sort of Provençal is like a French but with a sort of Italian thing going on. It's a very beautiful way of speaking, very sort of twangy, summery sounding form of French Provençal. And cricket itself is imitative of the
I
sound.
was going to say these are meant to imitate the sound that they make, which makes sense.
Yeah, exactly, because a cricket makes one sound and a cicada makes another clicky sound, but you could describe them both as a sort of kind of sound.
That reminds me of cockroach, right?
Oh yes, folk etymology at its finest, right?
Absolutely. It's from the Spanish cucaracha, and English speakers mangled it into cock and roach, which has neither of those terms has any relation to the Spanish word, which means like chafer or beetle, but could be also partially imitative.
We have a big beetle in Europe called a cockchafer.
All right. Excellent.
Which I think is the rudest.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate.
The rudest beetle is the cockchafer. Mm-hmm. Chafer means beetle, like Käfer in German, and cock is either a reference to the looking sort of a bit like the crest of a cock, but not very to my eyes.
I mean, I think this is one of those cocktail type of situations where like the most likely explanation is that it's a mangling of French coquetier, you know?
Yeah, just cocks just keep getting into all these nooks and crannies of the language, and we don't know how they get there. Just the
thinking about them all the time.
Full of cocks. We just can't get them out of our brains and out of our drinks. Can I mention one other rude sounding insect.
Yeah.
So it's only rude if you take its, I think, Latin name. Yeah. Which is Eubetia bigolae.
What? I don't even know what kind of bug you're talking about right now.
So it's the name of a species of moth, native to Venezuela. It's going to work better for people watching the video version of this, where I can put the word up here, or the two words that make up the name. But the way that you say it is, you better your big ole A.
What? Is that just how you pronounce a Venezuelan word, or
no. Say, okay, I'll spell it out. Eubetia, Eubetia, Bigaulae.
That's fantastic.
You better your big
What
ole.
does it mean?
Well, actually, I don't know. I get that far. It sounded like something. Although a more genteel interpretation of what it sounds like is "you bet your by golly," but it definitely sounds more like "you bet your big ole A."
Oh, that's great. I love it.
You've got some other goofy sounding bug names, right?
I do. My favorite is actually, I learned it just yesterday while researching this podcast, and it is my new favorite. Arachnid, actually. This one's a spider, but its scientific name and like its whole species name, it doesn't have kind of a generic name. It's Hot Wheels Sisyphus.
Hot Wheels leading the way.
And it was discovered like last year in China, and it's the only known species in its genus, which is named after the toy brand Hot Wheels, and it's also named after the Greek figure Sisyphus, who rolls his boulder up the hill in an eternal torture loop. And the reason it has both of these loopy names is because the male of this species has a reproductive tract that looks kind of like a squiggly Hot Wheels track.
Excellent. Hot Wheels Sisyphus.
Yes.
Okay, that's an easy one to remember.
My new favorite spider. I think we should address briefly granddaddy longlegs, or do you call them harvestmen?
So some people call those daddy longlegs. What I call a daddy longlegs is a crane fly. So that's the fly with the long body and the wings and very long legs. They sort of flap around, in the I guess they're in the sort of in the summer, aren't they? I'm not sure. People do call the spider though without the wings a daddy longlegs. I think I would, if I saw one, I'd call it a harvestman.
I think there is this distinction between some of these species, because there are also ones that look like granddaddy longlegs and or harvestmen, but they're not. They're something else. Or they're also like paper spiders, which look kind of like them and are not, because they're not spiders. They're arachnids, but they are not spiders. They are opiliones. Okay, I hope I said that right. Opiliones?
And what makes them not spiders?
They don't have the proper segmentation. They've got a round body with legs that are in the wrong spot, and every other spider's arachnids have the 8 legs coming out of the 2 body parts.
To get these definitions right, the things to look at: how many segments, how many legs, how many wings, and how do they eat? Those are the key criteria from what I've gathered.
Another fun one with a funny name. We're back to insects on this one. The fire brat. Have you heard of this one?
How hip.
It is a close cousin of the silverfish, which is also not a fish.
No.
They prefer warm places like bakeries and boilers and things. So brat, meant like a young or mischievous animal or something, and they like hot places, so they are called fire brats.
The fact that silverfish aren't fish made me think, I should look at why an earwig's called an earwig, because I'd completely forgotten that one. It probably is just related to ear and the idea of sort of wiggling. And the myths about them hanging out in ears.
Yep, that's about it.
I hate that. That's creepy.
Not a hat, not a hat for your ear, but a wiggler in your ear, which it doesn't do. But
which is grim.
There's also the noceum, tiny biting midges that are really hard to see until they land on you, bite, and then vanish again. There is a family, a taxonomic family that these belong to, but the noceum was also applied to many other types of little midges that you just don't see till they land on you.
There's a real sort of unobtainium lameness to that naming.
This is surprisingly old too. Another fun one, which I think might be my favorite type of bug name, I guess, is the whirligig, which is known for its like dizzying habit of spinning on the surface of water. They have two pairs of eyes, one above the water and one below the water, and they use them to chase prey while doing aquatic donuts.
Are they so called because of what whirligig means in other contexts, or does the word whirligig mean what it means in other contexts after the bug?
I believe whirligig in general is yeah, okay. It was originally a word for a top.
A spinning top. Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay.
And most people would probably say whirligig beetle, but you can also say like there goes little whirligig, and if you're pointing at a beetle, people know what you're talking about.
That's not spinning top.
There are a couple of other kind of funny names for beetles, like the devil's coach horse beetle, which is named for its aggressive behavior and long body shape. The harlequin bug, which, oh, hang on, is the harlequin bug a beetle or a...
Oh, God, we've got ourselves in such a mess with these definitions, haven't we? And we can just say all of the things we talked about are bugs. If you find them a bit annoying, by one definition, they are all bugs.
They fall under the category of entomology.
Okay, they're insects. Okay, got it.
They look like they have a little harlequin costume on. And then in the moth space, we have the death's head hawk moth, which is named for the skull-like pattern on their thorax.
Yeah, does look a lot like a skull as well.
Similarly to the whirligig, there's the water boatman, which is known for their like rowing or like legs, which I think is very cute.
Yeah, they are really cute. They do look like they're sculling in the water.
They are some of the only bugs that can sing underwater and use trapped air and their abdominal grooves to make noise underwater, which is cool.
They can sing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
When does one decide that the sound that something is making is song, as opposed to just a sort of screech? What else is doing that? But it might not be a screech. It might be a baritone. I don't know.
It depends on how romantic you're being, Rob.
Yeah, I guess
how poetic.
Oh, the water boatmen. How? Yeah, pond skaters as well. Water boatmen. So I remember from school, you're taken to a lake and like the really obvious things to say. Oh, look, there's a pond skater. There's a water boatman. I like the pond skater. It looks like a little sort of spider dancing on the the surface tension.
There's also the bombardier, which is a beetle that bombs predators with bursts of hot chemical spray. They basically like mix the chemicals in their abdomen and produce an explosive reaction. It can even apparently you can even hear the pop.
Oh, we've all done it.
Yes. And I just like the sound that they're the sound of the word weevil. Also, weevils are adorable. Like, have you ever zoomed in on a picture of a weevil? They got little feet, so they got little they're really cute.
Quite cute, yeah.
Cute little faces.
Yeah, not great if they're eating your biscuits.
On that note, should we scuttle on out of here?
Yeah,
like
let's
our
go.
Beetle friends.
Let's retreat to under our rocks. Back to the hive. Thank you very much for joining us for another Words Unravelled. Finally, the etymology of entomology has come to pass, and we can all stop telling Jess that joke.
I don't mind. It doesn't bug me in ways that I can't put into words. In fact, I find it very heartwarming.
Until next time, we'll catch you on Words Unravelled.
Bye.